Imagine heading to your local store and finding that your favorite imported gadget or appliance suddenly costs 10% more. Recent data from the University of Michigan shows consumer sentiment plummeting as families worry about inflation now at 4.3% in February 2025, forcing many to cut back on non-essentials or settle for lower quality alternatives. In today's video, we'll uncover how Trump's bold tariff policies are not just reshaping global trade, but are also hitting our everyday lives where it hurts the most. We'll break down what tariffs really are, how President Trump's bold strategy is turning old economic ideas on their head, and what that means for your wallet, from rising prices on your favorite electronics and appliances to the broader impact on jobs and consumer confidence. Let's dive in and explore the ripple effects of these tariffs and see how a global policy debate is reshaping the way we live, work, and spend. Chapter 1. Understanding tariffs. Tariffs are simply taxes imposed on imported goods. Traditionally, governments have used them to protect domestic industries and generate revenue. After World War II, however, the global economy largely moved toward free trade, allowing goods to cross borders with minimal restrictions. This shift helped lower prices and spurred growth. But with Trump's return to a more protectionist stance, tariffs are making a comeback, and with significant consequences. Trump's approach is unique. Instead of merely using tariffs as a fiscal tool, he employs them as both an economic weapon and a geopolitical bargaining chip. For example, his administration has proposed a 10% tariff on Chinese imports and a 25% tariff on goods from Mexico and Canada. While the stated goal is to correct trade imbalances and protect American jobs, these policies have sparked intense debate among economists, business leaders, and everyday consumers. Consider your daily shopping experience. Imagine that the price of your favorite imported snack, or even essential household goods, suddenly jumps because importers now have to pay an extra tax. Research indicates that if these tariffs are fully implemented, the average American household could face an additional annual cost of around $1.200. That extra cost might seem small at first, but it adds up over time, forcing families to tighten their budgets and reconsider non-essential spending. Studies from the Tax Foundation suggest that if proposed tariffs raise the average import tax rate to 17.7%, the ripple effect could be a significant burden on family incomes. Chapter 2. The Trump Tariff Playbook and Historical Context. When Trump first came to office, he quickly signaled his intent to reintroduce tariffs as a central pillar of his America First agenda. His approach has been to impose steep tariffs to force foreign nations into negotiations and to signal that America will not be taken advantage of. Key measures include a 10% tariff on Chinese imports and proposals for a 25% tariff on goods from Mexico and Canada. These tariffs are not applied uniformly. They're carefully targeted to affect what Trump describes as unfair trading partners. The idea is to pressure these countries to change their trade practices, reduce their trade surpluses with the U.S., and ideally shift production back to American soil. Looking back, protectionism was once the norm in the United States. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, tariffs were used to protect budding domestic industries. However, after World War II, a broad consensus emerged that free trade was essential for global prosperity. This shift contributed to decades of economic growth and increased consumer choice. But globalization also came with winners and losers. While many enjoyed lower prices and more variety, others saw jobs outsourced and local industries squeezed out of the market. Trump's tariffs are, in many ways, a response to those lingering frustrations. Supporters argue that these tariffs are necessary to rebalance trade deficits and bring manufacturing jobs back to America. Critics, however, point out that the history of tariffs is fraught with unintended consequences, including retaliatory measures by trading partners and overall higher prices for consumers. Imagine buying a washing machine or a smartphone. Under previous free trade policies, the cost of these products was kept low by competitive global pricing. But when tariffs were introduced during Trump's first term, average import tariff rates on some key goods jumped to 17.7%, setting off a chain reaction that drove up prices across many sectors. Analyses reveal that even modest tariff increases can translate into significant cost burdens for consumers. A study published in the Journal of Economic Perspectives in 2019 reported that, by December 2018, tariffs resulted in a reduction of aggregate U.S. real income by $1.4 billion per month in deadweight losses and cost U.S. consumers an additional $3.2 billion per month in added taxes. Chapter 3, Domestic Impact, Who Pays the Price? Although tariffs are designed to protect American jobs, they function like a tax on imported goods. Importers often pass these increased costs directly onto consumers, which can have far-reaching effects across multiple industries. Consider the U.S. auto industry. Modern vehicles are built on a complex web of global supply chains that rely heavily on imported components from parts made in Mexico and Canada to electronics manufactured in China. When tariffs raise the cost of these components, manufacturers often have no choice but to raise the price of the finished product. The result? A new car might cost several percentage points more, and those extra dollars are ultimately paid by you, the consumer. Domestic manufacturers are not insulated either. When tariffs cause global input prices to rise, even American companies that source materials domestically may face higher production costs. For instance, domestic brands increased washing machine prices by an average of $86 to $92 during the last tariff cycle. That might not seem like much for a single unit, but when you factor in the volume of sales, it represents a significant burden on household budgets. Imagine planning for a new car purchase or a household appliance upgrade suddenly. The cost has jumped by 10% or more simply because the supply chain is more expensive. Recent data from the University of Michigan shows consumer sentiment dropping sharply as families worry about inflation and the rising cost of living. Many are already cutting back on discretionary spending or turning to lower quality alternatives to make ends meet. Surveys reveal that consumer inflation has risen to around 4.3% in February 2025, while some projections suggest that tariffs may reduce household real income by approximately $1.200 annually. Chapter 4, Global Impact, Trade Wars, Retaliation and Geopolitics. These tariffs are not just a domestic tool, they're designed to send a geopolitical message and reshape international trade. When the U.S. imposes tariffs, trading partners often respond in kind, sparking a tit-for-tat escalation that disrupts global supply chains and unsettles markets around the world. Take China, for example. The U.S. imposed a 10% tariff on a broad range of Chinese goods, prompting China to retaliate with its own tariffs on American products. This trade war has forced companies in both countries to reevaluate their supply chains, with some moving production out of China to other regions in Asia. Similarly, the European Union and other trading partners have not hesitated to respond with counter tariffs on U.S. exports, as seen when the EU slapped a 25% tariff on U.S. bourbon. Trump's strategy uses tariffs as a form of economic coercion, an attempt to force other countries into negotiations on issues ranging from trade imbalances to national security. However, while tariffs may yield short-term concessions, they often create long-term uncertainty that destabilizes global markets. This uncertainty is reflected in fluctuating exchange rates, volatile stock markets, and shifting investment patterns worldwide. On the global stage, these trade wars ripple down to affect everyday consumers. For example, when major U.S. stock indices fell by as much as 2.2% following tariff announcements, the impact wasn't confined to Wall Street. Retirees watching their savings shrink, and families whose investment portfolios take a hit feel the consequences directly. Furthermore, international supply chain disruptions can lead to shortages of goods, from electronics to household items, forcing consumers to pay more or go without. Analysts at AP News noted that stock market indices such as the Nasdaq and S&P 500 experienced declines between 1.7% and 2.2% after tariff-related news, underscoring the widespread economic uncertainty. Chapter 5, Business and Consumer Adaptations in an Uncertain World. In response to rising costs and unpredictable policy shifts, companies are forced to reconfigure their supply chains while consumers adjust their spending habits. Many businesses have begun looking for alternatives to mitigate tariff impacts. Some companies are shifting production from China to countries like Mexico, Vietnam, or even back to the United States. For instance, a machine tool manufacturer in Wisconsin recently moved part of its production to Mexico, but then had to reconsider when news broke that proposed tariffs on Mexican imports could negate the cost advantages. Similarly, small businesses with thinner margins are scrambling to renegotiate supplier contracts or diversify their product sources. Small businesses in particular are feeling the pressure. With less diversified supply chains, many are forced to either absorb increased costs or pass them along to consumers, In some cases, companies have even begun stockpiling inventory to hedge against anticipated price increases. But such measures can only go so far before they disrupt normal operations. On the consumer front, uncertainty often leads to behavioral changes. Recent surveys show that 1 in 5 Americans have started stockpiling non-perishable items like canned goods, toiletries, and cleaning supplies in anticipation of further price hikes. This behavior, reminiscent of early pandemic panic buying, not only strains local supply chains, but also results in temporary shortages on store shelves. Moreover, as consumers brace for higher costs, many are cutting back on discretionary spending, impacting everything from dining out to leisure activities. According to PYM&TS Intelligence, about 48.6% of consumers plan to save more money in response to economic uncertainty, a clear signal that many are bracing for higher costs ahead. Chapter 6. Looking ahead, future prospects. Many economists warn that if tariffs remain in place, businesses may delay or cancel investment projects, and consumer spending could decline further. This scenario could lead to a slowdown in GDP growth, reduced job creation, and an overall dampening of economic dynamism. At the same time, industries that adapt successfully may find new opportunities, but not without initial pain. Looking ahead, several factors will determine the eventual outcome. These include the duration of tariff policies, the extent of retaliatory measures by trading partners, and the adaptability of American businesses. For instance, if the U.S. government and its trading partners can reach mutually beneficial agreements, some of the adverse effects might be mitigated. However, if the policy uncertainty continues, both businesses and households will have to adapt to a world with higher prices and reduced disposable income. For the everyday consumer, this means planning for a future where everyday essentials might cost more. A recent study by the Budget Lab at Yale University estimated that if tariffs remain, American households could lose between $1,900 and $7,600 in disposable income over the next decade. That's money that could have gone toward healthcare, education, or even retirement savings. Families might have to revise their budgets, cut back on luxuries, and save more for emergencies. Trump's tariff policies have far-reaching consequences that extend well beyond the realms of international trade and economic statistics. While the administration's stated goal is to protect American jobs and reduce trade imbalances, the reality is that these tariffs function as hidden taxes, raising prices on everything from automobiles to household appliances. This, in turn, squeezes family budgets and creates uncertainty across global supply chains. How would these changes affect your life? Let us know in the comment.
The world now stands at a crossroads. The decisions made today by governments, corporations, and global policymakers will determine whether this trade war propels economies towards self-sufficiency or drags them into prolonged volatility. One thing is certain, this trade war is not just a battle between two nations, it is shaping the future of global trade as we know it. So, what do you think? Is this economic confrontation a necessary step toward independence, or is it a dangerous game that could lead to long-term economic hardship? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on the latest developments in global trade, don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth analysis and discussions on the evolving economic landscape.